Welcome to the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast. Today, we are talking about the problem created by all of those postponed bar exams. When should you start studying if your bar exam results are going to come out super late? Yes, we're talking like 2021 late. Your Bar Exam Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We're here to demystify the bar exam experience so you can study effectively, stay sane, and hopefully pass and move on with your life. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. Alison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on your favorite listening app and check out our sister podcast, the Law School Toolbox Podcast. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on barexamtoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started.
Welcome back to the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking about the problem that's created by the fact that all of these exams, or most of them, happen really late. Namely, you're not going to find out until quite late that you didn't pass. So what should you be doing now? Do you need to study again? We're getting a lot of questions, so let's talk about it.
Yeah. Well, before we dive in, I think we should congratulate everyone who actually sat for that exam because it was the longest bar season ever.
Congratulations. Like, you did it.
You did it. You made it. But, usually we have that July exam, we have this nice cushy fall time, and then people start to pick up studying, after they get those results. But, for those of you who did sit for I don't even know how many, the July, September, or October exams. Right. We hope you passed, but the results are starting to come out for some of those earlier exams, and inevitably some people are going to find out that they failed. And in some of the larger jurisdictions, that might be as late as December or even January 2021. And boy, that next exam is going to come up fast because they're going to do it on the normal February date. Then CBE is committed to providing online materials for February. So that's a lot.
Right.
It's not very long. It's a lot different than before. So, and California is going to be the one that's going to be really confusing. You've been doing some research into where California is with all this stuff. What are they doing right now?
Well, I looked this up a couple of days ago. To be honest, I haven't updated it right now. But when I checked their website, they have one page saying that the final filing deadline for February is January 4th. And that page has a note that people who fail will have 10 business days to register for the next exam. So you're going to have to decide pretty quickly. However, there's also a different page on the website that says the final filing deadline is February 9th. So I don't really know what California is going to be doing at this point. You definitely want to pay attention to that and probably not rely on just one page on the website, because we don't even know at this point, apparently, what the actual filing deadline is. I mean, I looked at a couple of other states. New York, for example, right now has a deadline of November 30th to register. So maybe they're planning to get their results back sooner. Maybe they're going to move that deadline. I don't know. I think what we can say is if you find out you didn't pass, obviously you're going to have some window in which to re-register. But it sounds like that window could be pretty small. So things are going to happen quickly. And you kind of need to be prepared for that. And some people are really asking us, how do you think I should start studying again if possibly I failed? And I think that's a hard question, but we can talk about, how we might think about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a hard question. This isn't the first time we've gotten these types of questions, because even back in the before times, sometimes folks who were going to be working full time leading up to the next offering were concerned that if they waited until, especially in a jurisdiction like New York or California, where the results came out pretty late, would they even have time to study again, especially if they were working full time? So this is not a new problem, but I think it's going to be a new problem for many more people because of this condensed time frame. So I think the first question is, do you really think you failed? Are you having anxiety about failing? Because I think those are two different things. And I think when you think about what makes you think you failed, I think you can think of a few things. Were you a repeat taker that was coming back from a huge deficit, or I guess a huge gap in the passing score? Were you trying to make a huge leap? Then, I hope that you made that leap, but it's possible that you didn't. And so, maybe that is something that you want to consider. If you were incredibly anxious during the exam, if you had technology problems that may have led for you to fail, that might make it a little more likely that you failed. But I think you really need to think about, everybody who takes it will be like, oh, I'm sure I failed. But you really want to think about, did you have a chance to fail?
Right. I think when we're thinking about this, what I often ask people is, is there a specific reason you can point to that you think you failed this particular test? So we're not asking you, do you feel like maybe you failed the bar? Everyone who takes the bar thinks maybe they failed it. Some people are convinced they failed it and then they pass. But what we're talking about here is probably more along the lines of, you had really obvious timing problems on several essays, that type of thing. You
didn't finish the performance test.
You didn't finish the performance test. You didn't finish the MBE. You know that you were totally off base. After talking to other people, you realized that they were actually testing crim law, not torts, and you wrote about torts. Things along those lines. Not just kind of, I don't feel great about this test, because I don't think anyone feels great about it. There needs to be some reason. You didn't show up to a certain day. You got sick in the middle of it, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there can be real things that happened. And then I also think you need to, balance that with, what's life looking like on the way to the next exam.
Right. I think that's a huge consideration.
What if you have small children at home and you're trying to, manage remote school? What if you're also trying to work a full or part-time job? There's a lot of other considerations about how many hours you would even have to study if you do have that condensed time. If you've got to sit for February and you want to make sure you're prepared, I don't personally think you should sit for tests you can't get prepared for. So if you have to pass February and you think you failed July, then I do think you need to consider, spending some time getting ready early, and we can talk in a bit about, the specific things you could do. But I think you're going to have to consider doing it to make sure that February is a true try.
Right. I think that's the second piece of this, is how badly do you need to pass the February exam? If the answer is like, it'd be nice to pass February, but I could easily wait until July, there's nothing really riding on this for me right now, then I think you can kind of assume, okay, if I find out I failed, maybe I just plan to take it in July, and then you have a reasonable study period. If you have a job that was riding on you passing, if you failed, if it's riding on you passing the second time and you have to take the next exam, that is a different scenario. If you're locked into taking February and you absolutely need to pass it, then there's a much stronger argument for continuing to do some work now so that you're in a better position if that were to happen.
Yeah. You just got to be really thoughtful about it. Some people also don't want to wait until July because they're concerned about losing the knowledge that they did gain. Right. I think that can be a real concern for people. So if you really, killed it and you felt like you knew the substantive law, but you still have concerns over those results, then you may not want to wait until July, or you may be concerned that life is going to be more complicated in July. It's really tricky right now because the future is very uncertain.
Right. No, this is a very hard choice. All right. Well, let's assume people are listening to this and say, I have a pretty good reason to think that I did probably fail and I want to start studying early. What should they be doing? After all, you don't actually know how you did on the different pieces of the test.
True, but I think you do have some indicators going into an exam how you might have done. So if you were using a tool that was giving you a pass rate for the MBE and you were not getting over 60% or something like that, you were not getting into the range that you would really need to be comfortable to pass at that point it was a 100 question set for most people. You need to be working on MBE questions that probably didn't get you where you needed to be. Now, maybe you had an amazing rock star day.
Right. Maybe you guessed well
and knocked it out of the park. Right. But, if I had to, I'm not a gambling person, but if I had to gamble, I would guess that the MBE was not a strong point. So, I think looking at your past performance, looking at any feedback that you got from your bar provider, that's going to help you, figure out what happened or figure out where you should be spending your time. I also think that you want to think about the mistakes that might have been made in the room. So was time management a problem? Did you not finish the MPTs? I think that's another thing that you want to think about, because if the execution of the test was the problem, then starting to practice those pieces of the test, I think are very effective. I also think that, when we talk to people who failed, one of the things we hear over and over again is, I just didn't practice enough. I didn't have time to practice enough. And so if that's something that you are concerned about, then making sure that you do start to do some of this practice. You can typically use the books that you had from your bar review provider, or you can even invest in tools like our Brainy Bar Bank tool that has just a database of questions for California and the UBE, but you could continue to practice this law to keep it fresh in your head, but also just to make sure that you are solving some of the execution problems for each part of the test. When we talk to people who failed, a lot of people aren't that surprised by where their weak points were. Right. Sometimes they are. But I would say the majority of people can guess, like, oh, I've always struggled with the MBE. Oh, I've always struggled with the MPT. I've always had time management problems. I think if you step back, you can probably start to assess how to spend your time.
Right. I mean, there is a reason that you think you failed. So I would start with what that reason was and at least work on that. In terms of what people should be doing, I mean, I think one thing is just keeping this fresh in your head. So it doesn't have to be this super intensive time commitment, but even just a couple of times a week, go through your old outlines and things. I mean, if you don't have an outline that you made, maybe maybe that's something you look at, but hopefully you have some type of materials that you made that can help you refresh your recollection. And I think just keeping some of this in your memory until the point at which you get your results can be really helpful versus starting from scratch a few months from now.
Yeah. I also think that and nobody wants to invest a ton of money, right? I mean, because everybody feels like they're bleeding money for the bar exam. So you want to think about how you can use the resources you already have access to, or find resources that aren't going to, put you at a huge loss. So for instance, if you used Adaptabar and you want to use Adaptabar again, the price to sign up and extend your access is just not that much. So you may want to consider just investing in that as almost an insurance policy.
Right.
I'm just going to keep doing multiple choice work, just to have kept doing it. Or, a tool like our Brainy Bar Bank, or our tools, even like our self-study program that has study templates and things like that you can have access to. If you feel like you need more, you don't need to go pay for a $5,000 program to keep studying. You can be thoughtful about it and just invest some money in it while you wait. And then that's just your insurance policy. I mean, you're just kind of... That's kind of how I would think about it.
Well, and I think the smart bar outlines can be really useful here too, because they're fairly low price point, and something like that I can see just sitting down and literally reading for a couple of hours every week. And that is a very condensed set of the law. I mean, every time I look at those, I'm like, oh, right, that's right. I knew that about agency, It's just a level of stuff. You're like, oh, yeah, right. And your brain's thinking like, oh, right, okay, actual, apparent, blah-de-blah authority, So it's not super intensive and it's not super costly, but I think it could be a really good way to keep a lot of this fresher in case you end up needing it.
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. But the flip side of that is don't get caught up in just passive activities. I think if you still have access to your recorded lectures, just don't say, oh, I'll just listen to recorded lectures in the car because it'll be totally good. It'll get me where I need to be. Yeah, if you think you failed, it might be due to a lack of active learning. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. The other thing I would mention as we go, we look forward to February and we're not 100% sure a lot of the details, is if one of the reasons you feel that you struggled was because you either didn't get accommodation applications in time, or you didn't feel that your accommodations were what you needed, or you didn't have time to appeal an accommodations decision, I would work on that stuff now and just go ahead and try and make sure all of that stuff is in the bar and you're not scrambling to waste time. Because one of the things that you will definitely not have time for in the condensed bar season is drama. So if you've got to figure some stuff out with the state bar, do it now. Now is a great time to work on problems like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you need to make sure that's in place. Can people apply for that even if they're not sure they're going to be taking the next test?
You should call your bar and find out. especially if you had them in the past, I don't know. I mean, I think you should call the bar and ask, especially if you got denied. I do think that in the past, in jurisdictions like California, we've had students who, let's say, they applied for accommodations, they didn't get the accommodations they needed, and they were told they could appeal, but they didn't have time to appeal because of when the results from the decision came out. I think we've had students go ahead and file their appeal for the next season, even while they're waiting for results.
Yeah, I think that's right. Because sometimes people decide they're not going to take the test until they can get this sorted out.
Yeah.
So
I think that's
definitely something to look into if you are in this scenario.
Yeah. And don't forget, like, you can just call the bar. I think sometimes it's really hard to remember that there are people at these bar offices who are supposed to answer these questions for you. So it is important that you just go ahead and try and get these answers as quickly as you can so you can make decisions based on them. The other thing I would think that you'd want to spend time on is, what are you going to do after the results come out? Like, if you don't want to financially commit to resources, decide what those resources are going to be. I mean, we oftentimes will end up talking to people like before results come out who are worried, who are like, if I get bad news, I want to buy this program tomorrow and the day after, the day after I get those bad news, and move forward as quickly as possible, because there's not going to be a few weeks to debate what your options are. So do your research, talk to people, evaluate what's going to work for you. So if you need to pull the trigger, you can do so quickly.
Right, because the reality is every single bar tutor is going to be absolutely slammed as soon as the results come out, and people are going to be having to make decisions. I mean, people always have to make decisions fairly quickly, but you're going to have to make decisions very, very quickly if you want to end up working with someone that you want to work with. We're not saying that to scare you. It's just we're sort of looking at this too. We're kind of looking down the barrel of this fire hose of stuff going, oh my gosh, what are we even going to do?
Right. And a lot of people deferred. Even a lot of our students deferred till February because the summer exam was such chaos. Yeah. And so I think that, the bar prep community is going to be stretched and challenged. So you want to make sure that you feel good about your choices, that you know what decisions you're going to make, so you have the options that you want. Call us a couple weeks into bar season, 5 weeks, 4 weeks before the exam. We're not going to have any open spots. I think a lot of bar companies who do, higher contact work are going to feel that way. So make sure you understand your options so you can get on those lists, whatever fit is going to be the fit for you, as quickly as possible.
That being said, if you went to like Stanford and you're top of your class and you're pretty sure you did okay, you don't need to call us. You probably passed.
Right. You probably passed. Yeah.
I mean, no guarantee, but probably you passed. No, yeah. So don't worry about it.
And you can look at the statistics. A lot of schools produce statistics of your chance of passing. My school did. It's like, if you are in this portion of the class, you are this likely to pass the exam. So you can also, rely on that. I mean, there are outliers, but generally speaking, statistics are statistics. They give you a good idea of what are the likely outcomes.
Yeah, I would say if you're in that kind of challenge zone and you had an issue or two and you know that things maybe didn't go so well in certain parts, I would maybe be a little concerned at that point.
Yeah. So if you do want to retake in February, and you are, thinking about how you're going to study again, when you're doing research of your options, I just want to make sure you know that repeating what you did last time isn't going to work. And typically it's really not going to work in a condensed time frame. And right. I'm really speaking about these larger commercial courses where you spend lots and lots of time listening to recorded lectures. The reality is you're not going to have time to do that. So if you just think, well, I, took a commercial course like Barbary, I'll just redo Barbary in 6 weeks or 5 weeks, that's typically not going to work for most people. And it's probably not why you often get pass.
Yeah. It's how we often get people who are the third time taking the bar exam. They're like, oh, I studied once, it didn't work. I did the same thing again, didn't work. Maybe now I need a different approach. Just cut out the second time. Just figure out a different approach before.
Yeah. Think about, where your weak points were, and then figure out how you're going to get help to move past those. So, you just want to be thoughtful and just don't say, well, I'll just repeat what I did the last time, because usually that's not a great idea.
Right. I mean, if it didn't work for you the first time, it's highly unlikely to work when you're dealing with 5 or 6 weeks instead of 5 or 6 months. I mean, you had a lot of time already. So if that didn't work to begin with, it's probably not going to work when you're trying to do it just in a few weeks.
Now, we know a lot of people, more and more people, it seems like every year, are working and studying while trying to take the bar. And this is, I think, going to even be trickier. I know, in February. So you've got to be really thoughtful about this. I think if you are working and studying and you think there's a chance that you failed, I think you should start studying as soon as you can, and just chalk it up to experience. I just don't think that, 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week is going to get you where you need to be in a very condensed schedule. That being said, we have seen some crazy stuff happen. Like we talk about our blog post on how to pass the bar in 10 days. It is possible, but it's usually possible for people who are excellent exam takers generally. So these are people who did well on the LSAT, did well on the SAT, and did well in all their law school exams. Like that's the group of people who can try to pull off some magic at the end, because they come with a whole set of skill sets that they don't actually have to work on. They just kind of already have proven that they have those skill sets. But if you really are going to be working full time, especially if you have children at home, I think you should probably not do it in February if you can't start studying early.
I think that's fair. I mean, I don't see how that's possible that you get your results, say, the first week of January, and then you're working and possibly having other things going on, and then you're trying to study for an exam that's already less than 2 months away. It just seems completely impossible almost to me.
Yeah. And it's cold and flu season, even outside of COVID, I think we have so many students who then get sick and that knocks them back. I mean, there should just be lots of things that happen in the new year. So you've got to build yourself as much of a buffer as you can.
Absolutely.
So February seems like it's going to be all online again.
Some places, I think California, yes. Other places, I don't know what they're going to do yet. I don't think they've announced it.
No, I mean, the NCBE has announced that they're going to at least provide some materials for an online exam. So that's going to let other jurisdictions figure it out. But
and it seemed like they were also doing more with like score portability and stuff, which if true would be good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the October exam was kind of a mess in that way.
Right.
Yeah, just put it lightly. Yeah, I mean, I think that you better be ready to take an online exam, even if your bar isn't sure about it. We sure hope that it's not going to be, the last minute switching, like what happened in Florida and things like that.
Do they ever do that test? I've lost track, honestly, at this point, if that ever even happened.
I'd have to I've blocked it out, I think, because it was so traumatic what they did to people.
Yeah, so crazy.
Yeah. So, make sure that you know where to check your jurisdiction information. Make sure that you're staying on top of it, because you want to find out as soon as you can what their decisions are going to be. But, you better be ready to take it online. If you don't want to take it online, then don't take a February exam, unless you're in a jurisdiction where you're 100% sure they will take it in person.
Right, which I find it hard to believe anyone could say with absolute certainty they're going to give it in person at this point, given the coronavirus situation. Yeah. So It's a lot, guys. It's a lot. It's a tough time. It's a lot. It really is. And, then people think, oh, well, should I just wait until July when we know that it won't be online? I'm like, I don't know that it won't be online in July. I really can't give you that information. I'm sorry. Hopefully things would be more back to normal by then, but we don't really know. So, I think if you are saying, okay, maybe I'll just skip February and do it in person in July, I'm not even sure that that's necessarily that certain.
Yeah. I think we can't plan that far ahead.
Right. We just don't know.
We just don't know.
Idea.
We can't exactly tell you what each of these bar exams is going to look like in February, because we don't know yet. We can't tell you what July will look like because we don't know yet. If
we can't even tell you when you can register, because apparently the bar hasn't decided that yet either.
Yeah. So, or even when you're going to get your results. So I think that this is a tricky thing and it's fluid. So the best thing you can do now is just decide what you really need and when you have to take this test. And do you want to actively study for the February exam? I think that's, and then if you do, then you can start to decide, what you're willing to invest in it, whether you're really worried that you hadn't been successful on the summer exam, but we got to live with uncertainty. I wish it wasn't that way, but I think that's just where we are.
Right. I mean, I think at a minimum, even if I was fairly certain that I passed, I'm thinking like statistically speaking, it's probably pretty likely I passed, but things happen. I think even in that scenario, I would want to at least sit and think through, okay, if I really need to pass for February, what would I do if I found out that I failed? So at least you're not a deer in the headlights at that point, and think about, well, if I'm working, would it be possible for me to take time off? Like, how would that work? Not necessarily that you need to go and ask for it, but just kind of start thinking about, what would this look like, and kind of work backwards from there.
Right. Well, I don't know. I wish you guys the best of luck. I'm really sorry that this is happening to everybody. It's just
it's so
hard.
Crazy. It just impacts so many different things. And we feel for you because it is a very difficult situation to be in. And unfortunately, none of us can give 100% like perfect advice right now.
Yeah. But hang in there, try and take some deep breaths and just follow your gut. If you don't feel like you can take this on, then don't take it on. It's okay. I think, I always think about how we're going to look back at this time sometimes and the choices that we've made. And we're all just doing the best we can with the information that we have at the moment. And if in hindsight, you're like, I wish I should have taken that exam. I shouldn't have taken an exam. I shouldn't have done that. It's going to be okay because you're just making the best decisions you can in the moment. And I don't know anybody who's going to judge you on these decisions 10 years from now.
Oh, not at all.
I mean, not at all. This is going to be like such a crazy time that any job interview, anything is going to be like, oh, yes, 2020, 2021. Yeah.
The COVID days.
The COVID days.
No, I think the biggest problem right now is for people who normally would lose their job if they fail a second time. Mm-hmm. And a lot of big law firms are like that. You fail once, they're like, okay, well, things happen. If you fail twice, a lot of them let you go. So I don't know if they're going to be any more lenient around that or, what. That's probably, I think, the most difficult scenario is if you have a job where really it depends on you passing and you're not sure you passed.
Yeah. I think that's true. And maybe it's a good time to have a heart-to-heart with your job. Maybe if you don't think you're going to be set up for success for February because of some of these factors, maybe you go to them and say, can I just agree that I'm not going to sit for February and then we're going to do this in July?
Right, or just talk to them about like a policy, given the situation, can it be your policy at this particular time that, this thing that you would normally do doesn't really apply and people have until July to like sort this out?
Yeah. Yeah. So
worth a shot.
Look at all your options. Worth a shot. And you never know. I mean, because the thing is, a lot of jobs don't necessarily want you wasting time, like studying, if you're not going to be able to be set up for success.
Right.
So you never know. They might be more lenient. These are unprecedented times. You're allowed to ask slightly unprecedented questions.
Right, exactly. It's like maybe it is, make the argument it's in everyone's best interest that anyone who fails just has, they can take it in July and they can study. And then at that point, hopefully you have the time to do it. I mean, that's difficult for certain jobs, but I think it's worth asking. Like, why just assume it, don't assume it can't be true.
Right. Yeah. Everybody just take a deep breath. We're going to get through this. Someday this will all be over.
And hey, statistically, you probably passed. So this whole podcast might have been just needlessly scary to you.
True. All right. Well, any final thoughts?
Not really. I mean, honestly, I think it's just you've got to kind of evaluate your situation realistically, trying to put that anxiety aside and just figure out a plan that can work and then really hope for the best.
Yeah. Before we go, though, I'd like to thank a listener for sending in this question because this is a very thoughtful idea of something that we should be talking about at this time. So if you're listening and you have other questions, COVID or non-COVID related, you can feel free to email us and we will turn them into a podcast. So,
woohoo!
Yeah. All right. Well, we want to take a second to remind you to check out our blog at barexamtoolbox.com, which is full of helpful tips to help you prepare and stay sane as you study for the bar exam. You can also find information on our website about our courses, tools, and one-on-one tutoring programs to support you as you study for the UBE or California Bar Exam. If you enjoyed this episode of the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review on your favorite listening app. We really appreciate it, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you're still in law school, you might also like to check out our popular Law School Toolbox podcast as well. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Alison at lee@barexamtoolbox.com or Alison@barexamtoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at barexamtoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.